I think what's different about health and all policies is the fact that actually now is the time to actually think about everyone's job, whether you happen to be in a particular professional discipline, work for a particular bit of health, local government, social care, voluntary sector, surely has to be about that common aim. So every day, irrespective of where we come from, our professional background, the role that we have, thinking, how can my contribution today give the conditions for people to be able to change, become more resilient and take, if you like, more responsibility and care for their own well-being into the future. So it's becoming almost like endemic that people now think this is actually the core business. And I think I'm seeing change. It's a long, hard slog, but I'm starting to see some of the change in that area now. Well, there's no doubt at all that actually if we create the conditions, whether it be through better housing, better job opportunities, and particularly meaningful employment and training, because people forget this, the nature of how economies work, it's not just about employment per se, it's about making sure the right jobs are actually being created for our people in our places, and those youngsters that are coming through the school system early years have the aspiration to be anything they want to be. Because if you settle those conditions about the wider determinants, the social determinants that Michael Marmot has always talked about, and guess what happens? You then end up with an aspiration that's higher. You end up with this ecosystem that I've referred to, delivering not just economic gain, which of course is important, but a prosperity and an output that is enjoyed by so many more than was the case in previous generations. So it's really interesting because I think the way I would move away from the notion of healthcare is to think about local government, working, yes, with some enabling guidance, legislation support from central government. It's actually move away from that notion of healthcare towards the notion of health, well-being, livability, sustainable, prosperous places that actually do become better connected, to be able to allow people with their families to live much healthier, longer, more sustainable and prosperous lives. So what I'd say is local government has always been and always will be best placed to be able to convene our places, to think about how we can bring all of what I've called unusual suspects together. And in some ways, sometimes national government, central government, government of any kind needs to understand actually, rather than being proactive in that space, how we sometimes step out of it to enable people to really deliver the kind of change that they want. So it's that heady mix really, but remember it's tough. I mean, local government, including Coventry, has faced somewhere in the region of 50–51% reduction in our revenue budgets over the last 5 years. So we've got to be realistic about the resources that are available to us. But actually, back to the question about health and all policies, we've got to find a way of making sure we can turn just that scarce resource and focusing it less on functions and much more about how we think about the whole place and how people live their lives. Oh, well, I mean, if you're going to make change around really impact on people's lives, dogged kind of measurement that has shown us in Coventry and many other places, those inequalities have been kind of robust and difficult to move for decades. Let's be realistic. We're not going to make this change overnight. So one of the biggest barriers, of course, is what I call attrition. It's a notion of people, good people, policymakers, community groups, individuals, put a huge amount of effort into thinking about a much wider, more expansive view of health and all policies, but it's tiring. So you need resilience, you need to be able to keep going when actually you get knocked down a bit. Remember my notion of a pinball machine, you get caught in this. Sometimes you're trying to make meaning and actually people, there is collateral damage. So the first thing is to keep people going, self-supporting the systems, our places, to really put your arms around those that really want to make the kind of change for the future. And then there's caused a raft of other barriers which I've talked about in my presentation today. It's kind of this notion of professionals and politicians. At our best we are brilliant, but we can't be heroes, we can't deliver all of this change. So the biggest barrier is again to understand our role is to, if you like, energise, catalyse, but then to remove ourselves from the heroic solutions and let other people come in. And if we can just make a mixture of all of that, I'm really optimistic actually about the future. I said in my presentation, I've said it for a number of years, you really cannot afford as a local authority or a place, because that's what we're really talking about, to be paralysed into almost inactivity, because this is such a big agenda. So the question of where do you start is really important, but I've said you start somewhere. You start anywhere and you follow it everywhere, but you go towards a shared common aim, which is to say, actually, we're here to improve aspiration opportunities for all of our community to live healthier, prosperous, more sustainable lives. And if you've got that common aim, and then allow people to basically go where their interest takes them, be organic, be disruptive, really kind of disrupt the status quo, that's what we should be doing. And I think if we can find a way of doing that, I would say to local authorities, go where the energy is, follow it, connect people to it, but always remember you're not there to control it. You're there just to grow it and then allow it to flourish. And I think this is a really, really tough time for us, but I think if we can see more examples in local authorities up and down the country, I think we'll start seeing the dividends and the benefits. I always get inspired when I come to events like this and see an audience that clearly has got people that have made a conscious decision to step out of their roles, whether they're clinicians, politicians, senior colleagues, public health colleagues, academics. They've decided they want to spend time reflecting personally and professionally about how they can make a contribution and challenge probably themselves to how they can think about health in all policies and drive places and people's futures in a positive way. So I'm always inspired by looking out and seeing people that clearly care. And of course, being on a panel, with Shirley, Sally, and certainly Michael Marmot, I've known for a number of years and privileged that he supported us, gives me a sense of there are bright, courageous people, both in the audience and on that panel, that will not rest until we see proper structural change to create a much more equitable place in which to live.